Hey guys, thanks for tuning into the My Career Path podcast. So today I'm actually doing some research on what the salary expectations versus salary reality is for that first year out of college, because I know for me it was a bit of a wake-up call when I got out of college. I guess in my head I had a much bigger number than was initially true, or what the reality actually is. So hoping to shed some light on it for you guys so you don't have the same mistakes that I do. So let's get into it. So this episode is going to be focused more on college students, just because I feel like there's a bit of a disparity between what the salary expectations are for that first year after college and what they actually are for that first year out of college. And I graduated not too long ago, and just kind of seeing that firsthand, I just wanted to share my experience as well as kind of the research that I've done going into it. So imagine, if you will, that you just finished college or you're about to finish college. You finally have that degree in your chosen field. You've been studying for it the past 4 years. You've been working hard, and you're ready to get that full-time job. That job you're going to work at that's going to pay you big, because now you finally have that degree. That big piece of paper that people have been telling you all your life, hey, grow up, go to college, and that way you'll be able to earn it big. You're a bit uneasy because school is all you've really ever done. Every day, except for in the summer, you pretty much got up. Somebody told you what to learn. Someone told you what assignments you had. And then you went home, did your homework, and then repeated that on for the last 12 to 15 years of your life. So now what? You've been told that you should always go to college because it's a great jumping off point and you'll be able to earn more money. So you've started applying for jobs before you graduated, and you're lucky enough to actually land a few interviews. And in the middle of most of those interviews, you're going to have that all-important question. What are your salary expectations for this job? And that's a really intimidating question for a lot of people. I know it is for me, especially when applying for jobs online. Sometimes they don't even list what the salary is. So how are you to know? And how are you to even respond, really? So what do you say? If you're like the majority of students or recent graduates, you've likely overestimated what your salary should be. One college student reported in 2015 that they expected to earn around $62,000 a year, but only got $32,000. Which is nearly half of what they expected. And that can be a little bit deflating. We just invested so much time and money into college, and sometimes walk away with college with more debt than our actual annual wage. And I'll be honest, I really wasn't sure why I overestimated my salary so much after graduating. It was probably a combination of what people had told me growing up, that I would make more money with a degree than without, or having an idea of what my parents and their siblings make, like my aunts and uncles. But the difference there is they've all had full-time jobs for longer than I had been in college, longer than I had been alive in some cases. And so their experience had really overshadowed what the degree is. And even in interviewing people on this show, when I asked them, hey, how has your college degree benefited you? And a lot of it is, well, it really helped me kind of get going, but after a while, I can't say that what I learned in my class is something that I'm still using today. A lot of a degree is showing, hey, I can learn things, I can do things, but until you have that experience to really back it up, your salary might not be what you think it is. So here's some of the average starting salaries for the last several years, according to Zippia.com. And keep in mind that people typically overestimate their starting salary by about 23%. So in 2015, the average starting salary was $50,219 after college. If you graduated in 2016, starting salary was $50,359. 2017, $50,516. 2018, $50,944. So all four of those years, 2015 to 2018, were right in that $50,000 ballpark, kind of increasing slowly. And then in 2019, the average starting salary was $53,889. 2020, $55,200. 2021, $55,200, so no change between 2020 and 2021. And then in 2022, $55,260. So typically the average is going to be around $53,000 right out of college. And honestly, that's a pretty good wage to start out on with little to no experience. And what it was also interesting to me as I looked into the different degrees that had the highest variance between the expectations and the reality, a lot of the social studies degrees like psychology, liberal arts, and things like that were actually, expectations were much closer to what reality was, about that $50,000 range. But one of the most egregious examples was business, which is actually what my degree is in. The expected salary was about $60,695, and the actual salary was only $46,500, which is about a $15,000 overestimate. I always thought I was worth more than what I actually might be. And it's something else that, especially in the interviews that I've done with Bart Brown, especially where he's talking about hiring and getting new hires, when you're coming out of college, you think you're a big shot almost. I mean, typically you'll have pretty good grades. You've done well enough to actually get your degree. But when talking with an employer and actually seeing what the work is, sometimes it's better to have experience behind you rather than a degree, which is why I think a lot of the trade schools and things like that are a fantastic option nowadays. You don't have to go into so much college debt. It doesn't cost nearly as much, and you get right into the workforce after about a year, maybe 9 months. It's a very quick solution to a market that is really in demand for employees and people willing to work. People will pay a lot of money to have a good plumber, electrician, construction specialist. And I think another reason to why there's this kind of overestimation of salary is how popular it's become to get a college degree. That was a huge push for the last 2 decades to make sure that people grow up and go to school to actually get a degree. Since 2009, the amount of people with a college degree in the U.S. has grown from 37.9% to 53.7%, a nearly 15 to 20% increase according to Forbes.com. Having a college degree doesn't mean as much as it used to because there's much more competition for those who have a degree. A lot more people are graduating from college and also having the same degree as you are. So how are you going to stand out? What's going to make it so they actually choose you over other people? Just jumping in here real quick to share a website I've used and will continue to use to improve myself and my career. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes to choose from. Whatever you're passionate about, you can find an amazing class on Skillshare to hone your practice. Skillshare has what you need. Learning is so critical for our lives and is a lifelong journey. Even when we finish school, we should keep on learning and keep working to improve ourselves. So you can try Skillshare absolutely free for 1 month. Go to Skillshare.com and sign up and use the code MyCareerPathFree. That's all lowercase, no spaces, to start your first month at no charge. And when you do decide to keep on taking those classes, use the code MyCareerPath30, that's MyCareerPath30, to get 30% off your first year on Skillshare. Keep learning and keep going. Now let's get back to the show. And then, of course, it's also difficult once you get into that interview position and they're asking you that salary estimate. I mean, how do you answer that question? No one really talks about how much money they actually make. It's almost a secret amongst neighbors and friends and even siblings and family members, because then it becomes more of a competition between who makes more money and who doesn't, whose job is more valuable, whose job is more important in the eyes of wage. So how do you answer that question? I looked up an article, and like I said, I enjoy listening to Dave Ramsey, and Ken Coleman is one of my favorite podcast hosts and career coaches out there. He wrote an article just going over that, and I'll leave a link in the description for anyone who wants to check it out. So one of the most important things that Ken Coleman says is to actually do research on the job or title that you're applying for. See what the average or median salary is for that kind of a company, as well as look at how big of a company it actually is. A smaller company isn't going to be able to pay as much as a Fortune 500 company. So even just doing a quick Google search can help you give a better idea and get a better ballpark answer of what it could be. So some of the other topics that Ken Coleman talks about in this article is making sure you account for your skill level and experience. And coming out of college, you might have some really essential skills that people need, but you might not have the experience to back that up. So take that into account when you're asking about a desired salary range. I mean, depending on the role, you might be making less in an entry-level position than others. I know, especially in the technology market and industry, there's a huge demand for programmers and people who understand how to talk to computers, essentially. So those jobs are naturally going to pay higher for someone who has that basis understanding compared to a manager who hasn't ever managed before in a business. So making sure you're taking that into account and seeing what your skill level is, what your knowledge is, and making sure that you understand what the average is. What should you know how to do, and how can you make the position that you're applying for worth it for your employer? Another topic that he talks about is think about your cost of living. Look at the market for where you're actually looking at that job, whether it be in the city or state, and get an understanding of what the cost of living is. You might need 90 or 80,000 if you want to live in New York or California, but the lower populated states, you might not need as much because it's a much lower cost of living. So just making sure that you have that in account and doing your research beforehand can really help out and really benefit you from making sure that you answer the question appropriately to what you want as well as what your employer is looking for. And one of the most important parts of the hiring and interview process is that question. That can really determine whether you get the job or not. Say too much and they may push you aside. Say too little and you may be working for less than you really want. And one of the things that Ken Coleman also talks about is the importance of negotiation. Making sure that you and your employer can come to some kind of an agreement, whether that be you find a good starting wage that you can then grow from, or making sure that it's a discussion instead of, well, it's either a take it or leave it. And I remember a while back I was reading a book called Never Split the Difference. It was one recommended to me by one of my college professors. It's from a guy named Chris Voss, and he's actually a former FBI hostage negotiator. So if there's somebody who knows something about negotiation and making a deal and making sure everybody can get home safely, it's Chris Voss. So he talks about some of the different negotiating tactics that he has. And one of the most important parts that he talks about is actually setting a good anchor. And typically when talking about a wage, this is setting a little bit higher of an anchor. So for example, let's say you're hoping to get about $75,000 a year. You're in the second round of the interviews and you feel like it's been going really well. Maybe setting a higher anchor of $90,000 and then negotiating it back to what you actually want in that $75,000 makes your employer also feel like they get a win. Instead of going, well, I want $75,000 and then end up settling for less. You have to realize that there's two parties at stake. The employer wants to hire someone who's going to fulfill the job and also make money for the company, but not to the expense of, well, we have to pay this ridiculous amount and we're not going to make our money back. And you, as an employee, want to be paid a fair wage. So setting this higher anchor point makes your employer feel like, well, I saved myself $15,000, and you end up getting what you actually want. But the importance is knowing what you actually want. If you're going to negotiate, it should be said that you need to be able to compromise and work with the other end. Another thing that Ken Coleman talks about is the importance of benefits. A lot of companies will offer healthcare benefits, 401k matches, dental and vision plans, and a whole bunch of other benefits for employees, which may mean that your annual wage would probably go down a little bit because you're not paying for those yourself. So understanding what benefits are available can also help you set that gauge. So really what it boils down to is when you're answering that question, you have to know what you want. You have to do some research beforehand instead of going into the interview and going, this is what I want to make. Another thing that's also really helped me, especially in filling out online applications where they typically will ask you what your desired pay range is putting a very specific number on your desired pay. And what I mean by specific is not just saying, well, I'm hoping for $70,000. I'm hoping for $75,000. I mean like a specific number. Like if you're hoping for $75,000 or right in that range, instead of going, yeah, I'm looking for $75,000, I would say go for $76,512 and put that as the range. I've actually had several employers who, when I was doing the interview process, ask me about that, where I put in a specific number like $68,821. And they ask me and they go, how do you even calculate that number? Like I was dividing it out and I'm like, this is like 23 and 52 cents an hour. And so I would just explain to them, well, that's what I believe is enough to take care of my family and reach our financial goals at this time. I want to be able to provide for my family. I want to be able to buy a house. I want to be able to cover all expenses and be able to save for the future and provide for years to come. And it kind of jars them and it helps you stand out, which, especially in the job application process, is incredibly important. Finding ways that you can actually stand out to your employer, finding ways that you can be remembered, is important in any hiring process. Because if you're the guy who's wearing a pink suit to an interview and you're actually competent and answer all the questions well and are confident, they're going to remember you a lot more than if you look and talk like everybody else. Now, I don't want this to sound like you shouldn't go for more money or just go anywhere, but a lot of the times we decide what job we want to do based on the money we make and based on the money we could earn. I don't want you to have the same feeling that I've had for a while where I just continue to go to work just so I can pay the bills. I want you to have some kind of a purpose. I want you to feel that your work actually matters. And so finding ways that you can actually talk with people about earning a fair pay and doing what you love, and the money will follow. Again, I think back to the different YouTube creators and content creators that I've seen. Dude Perfect, where they started out doing trick shots and now they're building their own amusement park and seem to be doing very well for themselves, doing things that they love, entertaining, doing a family-friendly show and just laughing and goofing around. I think of BattleBots on TV, where it's a group of people who are coming together with robots that are actually dueling in an arena, and there's a whole show built around it. So finding what you actually love, and the money will follow if you're willing to put in the work and if you're willing to actually turn it into something. And just going away from I want to do this because I know it'll make money. I want you to do work that you actually enjoy and get paid well to do so. And the last thing I will say is I don't want this episode to seem like it's a downer, that you need to lower your expectations or anything like that, but it can help, especially when trying to find that first job at a college and start actually accumulating that experience that you need, is to have a better idea of what you're getting yourself into. When you're just shooting off numbers of what you think is fair, when you haven't done the research behind it, just doesn't work out for you. You'll have a lot of people who will turn you down or turn you away because you might be asking too much. So really do the research on jobs you're applying for. Really look into what you can earn and what the estimated pay range would be. And try to have an open conversation with your potential employers about that. Because money is one of the most difficult things that we deal with, especially with other people, like in our marriage relationships and with our friends. And it's important that we talk about it and are open and honest about it. So make sure you're doing your research and make sure you understand what you're going to be asking for. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a like and make sure to leave a comment. I'd love to get your feedback. Make sure to leave a 5-star review if you did enjoy. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear what careers you guys are interested in and if I can get some people on the show that I can interview them with. So email me at Colten, that's Colten, at mycareerpathpodcast.com. Catch you guys later. Bye.